Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Emir of the State of Kuwait.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for all being here. It's my great honor to welcome His Highness the Emir of Kuwait to the White House. The United States and Kuwait share a strong and enduring partnership. We recently commenced the 27th day of remembrance of Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, which we all remember so well. The United States is proud to have contributed to the liberation of Kuwait and for the friendship we have built together in the years since. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to our shared security interests and recognize Kuwait's critical contributions to regional stability. We also thank Kuwait for its humanitarian leadership and for its partnership in the fight to destroy ISIS. During my trip to Saudi Arabia, I spoke to the leaders of more than 50 Arab and Muslim nations about the need to confront our shared enemies, murderous terror groups that threaten all civilized people. Every responsible nation must work together to strip these groups of their territory, their financing, and the false allure of their evil ideology. I applaud Kuwait for its role in this effort and encourage all nations in the region to do their fair share in defeating those who wage war on the innocent. Each nation in the region must decide what kind of future they want for their own children, one of violence or one of peace. That also means confronting those, such as the Iranian regime, who support terror groups and radical militias. Cooperation between America and Kuwait has never been stronger, never ever. The FBI and the Kuwaiti government are expanding our counterterrorism and intelligence sharing efforts. We're making progress on promoting Kuwaiti investments in the United States. They're making tremendous investments in our country. They have great confidence in our country. We're also entering a bilateral agreement with Kuwait regarding customs enforcement. During the same period and the same trip to Saudi Arabia, which was my great honor, representing our incredible country, His Highness personally asked me to expedite a $5 billion agreement for the sale of American F-A-18 Super Hornet fighting jets for Kuwait. I am pleased to report that the State Department has now authorized this transfer and purchase, which will not only strengthen our mutual security, but will greatly benefit American workers. Kuwaiti's investments in America through its sovereign wealth fund are profitable for Kuwaiti people, and they create many, many jobs in the American workforce. I am pleased to report this year that Kuwait has taken delivery of 10 American-made Boeing 777 airliners. They're beauties. American workers build the best planes in the world by far, and we want them to be made available for those countries that want them. And Kuwait has been a big buyer of commercial airliners made by Boeing and others. Our partnership extends beyond shared economic and security interests. We're signing a memorandum to deepen the close educational ties between our two countries, enhancing English language, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're enhancing the whole relationship through the use of the English language, and that is something that's very exciting, I think, for both of us. I want to thank His Highness for his leadership role and the role he's playing to help the nations of the Gulf Cooperation Council follow through on their pledges from all over, because we went to Saudi Arabia and the pledges of ending terrorist financing came from every country in that magnificent room on that magnificent day. And we are addressing the ongoing GCC dispute. And the Emir is leading those discussions, and hopefully it'll be resolved very soon. We call on our GCC and Egyptian allies to focus on our commitments at that Saudi Arabia summit, to continue our joint efforts to drive out and defeat terrorists. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt are all essential U.S. partners in this effort. We have great relationships with all of them right now, maybe better than we've ever had. We will be most successful with a united GCC. Tomorrow, Secretary of State Tillerson and Foreign Minister Al-Sabah will chair the second U.S.-Kuwaiti Strategic Dialogue. By strengthening communications with allies like Kuwait, we send a strong message to both terrorist organizations and regional aggressors that they cannot win. They will not win. They cannot win against us. And our military is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And that those who cherish and value human life will always prevail. I want to thank His Highness for joining us here today. The United States values its close friendship with Kuwait and its people, and we look forward to strengthening these bonds even further. Together we will show the world that the forces of destruction and extremism are no match for the blessings of prosperity and peace. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
My dear President, Mr. President Donald Trump, Your Excellencies and Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted and my delegation to be here today in Washington, this great city, in response to the invitation that His Excellency, my friend, President Trump has extended to me. I would like at the outset to reaffirm and send once again our condolences to the President and the people, the American people, about the victims of Harvey hurricane that hit Texas. And we are deeply affected by the human losses and the huge destruction in public facilities and property. I pray to God Almighty that He would make this the coming hurricane that is about to hit Florida, for it to be a harbinger of goodness, not evil. I wish and hope that the losses would not be harmful to the American people and would not cause further sadness and grief for those who will fall victim to this hurricane. Once again, we reaffirm that we stand by our friends in the U.S. In fighting and confronting this issue. We have held deep and comprehensive discussions that reflect the depth of our bilateral and historic relationship and advanced relationships in all levels at the political, economic, and military and security levels, in order to serve the mutual interests of our two countries and people. I here would like to commend the commitment that we have sensed here on the part of the U.S. about the security of the state of Kuwait. And within the framework of these relations, we we remember with great gratitude the great role that the U.S. played when it assumed the leadership of the international coalition that liberated my country from the throes of the invading Iraqi forces and restored its freedom. And this memory will remain forever in the minds of the Kuwaiti people. We also highly value the strategic relations between our two countries. We have discussed the situation in the country, foremost among which is the unfortunate dispute between our brothers in the Gulf region and our efforts to contain it, and the international support that we have received for these efforts. We have also discussed our common efforts in cooperation with the international community in fighting terrorism and ending the sources of funding for it. And in this regard, I would like to commend the prominent role that the United States plays in combating terrorism, especially the recent victories against terrorism. And we have also discussed the situation in Iraq and the catastrophic situation in Syria and Yemen and Syria and Libya, and we affirmed the need to end the fighting there through dialogue between the various disputing parties, and we have affirmed the necessity of the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility in maintaining international peace and stability, which represents the because the continuation of those struggles continues to be a threat. With respect to the Palestinian question, we have praised the recent U.S. efforts to move the peaceful process, and we affirmed the need to join efforts in order to reach a comprehensive and lasting solution to this problem on the basis of a two-state solution and in accordance with the international legitimate resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. Once again, I thank His Excellency the President for his kind invitation to us and for his kind hospitality, and we look forward to meeting with His Excellency the President in the state of Kuwait within the framework of our efforts to further enhance our relations and build on our strategic relationship in the service of the interests of both countries and peoples. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, we'll take a couple of questions. Go ahead. Yeah. Actually, we'll go somebody else this time, John. You've been doing enough, John. Go ahead, John. CBS.
Major. Here we go. Thanks. Mr. President, on the question of North Korea, the country feels that a crisis is coming. Some lawmakers, Lindsey Graham among them, have almost described the situation as inevitably leading to war. I don't want to ask you if you think it's inevitable. What I do want to ask you is, as President of the United States, would you tolerate a nuclearized North Korea that is contained and deterred, but still nuclear? Or would it have to abandon nuclear weapons, and would military action on the part of the United States be one of the options necessary to achieve that goal?
Military action would certainly be an option. Is it inevitable? Nothing's inevitable. It would be great if something else could be worked out. We would have to look at all of the details, all of the facts, but we've had presidents for 25 years now. They've been talking, and the day after an agreement is reached, new work begins in North Korea, continuation on nuclear. So I would prefer not going the route of the military, but it's something certainly that could happen. Our military has never been stronger. We are in a position now, and you know the new orders, you see the numbers just like I see the new numbers. It's been tens of billions of dollars more in investment. And each day, new equipment is delivered, new and beautiful equipment, the best in the world, the best anywhere in the world, by far. Hopefully, we're not going to have to use it on North Korea. If we do use it on North Korea, it will be a very sad day for North Korea. Do you have a question for the Emir?
Follow-up, is it acceptable for you as president for North Korea to be nuclearized but contained and deterred? Is that a strategy
we're going to see what it is? I don't negotiate with you. No, I'm not negotiating with you. Maybe we'll have a chance to negotiate with somebody else, but I don't put my negotiations on the table, unlike past administrations. I don't talk about them. But I can tell you that North Korea is behaving badly, and it's got to stop. Okay? A question for the Emir?
Your Excellency, you mentioned in a general sense the situation with Qatar. How optimistic are you about it being resolved, and what role would you like the President of the United States to play in achieving a resolution?
We still have hope that the dispute would be resolved between Qatar and its neighborly countries in the GCC, especially that our friends in the US and our other friends are assisting us in resolving this issue. I am optimistic that the solution will come in a very near future, God willing.
Question for the, yes, for the Emir first, yes.
My question is for you, Mr. President, first. Kuwait News Agency, Kuwait شروق صادقي. هل تؤيدون دور الوساطة؟
Do you support the Kuwaiti mediation role between Qatar and the four countries, and do you support the holding of a conference that will include all parties in Kuwait? Thank you.
Well, I do appreciate and respect the mediation. I would be willing to be the mediator. I was telling the Emir before that if I can help between UAE and Saudi Arabia, where I have a very great relationship. I spoke with the king yesterday, King Solomon. He's a friend of mine, and we spoke on unrelated subjects, but we had a long conversation. If I can help mediate between Qatar and, in particular, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, I would be willing to do so. And I think you'd have a deal worked out very quickly. I think it's something that's going to get solved fairly easily. Kuwait has been really the leader of getting it solved, and we appreciate that very much. But I do believe that we'll solve it. If we don't solve it, I will be a mediator right here in the White House. We'll come together very quickly. I think we'll have something solved.
أحمد مكي
Ahmad Makki,
سيدي حضرة صاحب السمو الله ورعاكم هل تم
Mr. Emir, in light of the regional conditions in the region, has there been an assertion on the role of the U.S. commitment to the security of the state of Kuwait? Thank you. Thank you. And you have heard now what His Excellency the President has said about the relations between Kuwait and the U.S. and its assertion of its commitment to the security of Kuwait. And this is not something new. And don't forget that the United States has managed with its other allies. When Kuwait was occupied, it liberated Kuwait from Iraq within a few months. And this is something that the Kuwaiti people remember very well, and everybody also. And we here thank the United States and the American people for that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nadia Bilbisi with Al Arabiya Television. You dispatches a team to Israel and Palestine, and you are about to meet the leaders of both countries in the UN soon. Do we expect a new American initiative to move the process forward? And if I may, sir, The UN has just published a report about Syria's Assad regime using chemical weapons. They said that basically he used it more than two dozen times. Does that mean that President Assad is immune now from any prosecution? And what can you do to stop the further use of chemical weapons? Thank you.
Well, first of all, the Palestinians and the Israelis, we are discussing, we are working. They say it is the world's most complex and difficult deal. You know that. But it is something that could happen. I believe that the relationships that we have with both can help. It's an event that's just never taken place. Sometimes people think they're close and it never happens, or it never happens successfully. I think we have a chance of doing it. I think the Palestinians would like to see it happen. I think the Israelis would like to see it happen. And usually when you have two groups that would like to see something happen, good things can happen. So I think there is a chance that there could be peace. But again, I say that a little bit reluctantly. We're going to give it our best. We have tremendous talent working on that particular transaction. As you know, David Friedman, the ambassador, is very much involved. We have a great group of people. We'll see what happens. As far as the chemical weapons, I find it hard to believe that after what we did the last time, that Assad would do that again. I haven't heard what you just said, but I find that a little bit difficult to believe. But nothing would change. We would be extremely upset if he was using chemical weapons. As far as Syria is concerned, we have very little to do with Syria other than killing ISIS. What we do is we kill ISIS. And we have succeeded in that respect. We have done better in 8 months of my presidency than the previous 8 years against ISIS. So ISIS is rapidly disappearing, as you know, and that's because of our great military. The military has been absolutely incredible in terms of what they've done with ISIS in Iraq and in Syria. Do you have a question for the Emir?
Yes, Mr. To the Emir, all the parties are holding on to their own positions with respect to Qatar. Where do you see a breakthrough in this dispute? Do you see any indications to make us believe that this crisis will come to an end? The hope has not ended yet. I would like to affirm that Qatar is ready to meet all the demands that were put, the 13 demands that were presented, and is ready to sit at the table to negotiate and to discuss with us all everything related to the dispute between the parties, the Gulf parties. As you know, we have 13 demands that were presented, and we know that not all of these 13 demands are acceptable. But if we were to sit down together and discuss these 13 demands, and we have indeed accepted them, and Qatar has accepted them, we would be able to resolve all 13 demands, all the issues and points that harm and relate to the dispute between the countries of the region, and anything that harms the interest of our other friends. Thank you.
This all began because of the fact that there has been massive funding of terrorism by certain countries. And what I want is stop the funding of terrorism. And we're going to stop the funding of terrorism. And if they don't stop the funding of terrorism, I don't want them to come together. But I think they will. Okay? You have a question? Your people have a question, yes. Go ahead, to the Emir.
سمو الأمير
Your Highness, I'm Said from Al Jazeera. Mr. President, we talk about Kuwaiti mediation and supporting Kuwaiti mediation. Are the tracks and a meeting that happened in Kuwait which receive U.S. and international support? Is there in reality something clear and a breakthrough that has been accomplished in this crisis? Are we about to see at the beginning of a breakthrough, or Your Highness, are the issues so complicated? We talked about a deep discussion about all the issues. What is the real issue and complicated issue at the heart of this dispute? We would like to find some information. Where is the problem here, so that we can solve it? Thank you. First of all, I would like to say there is no problem that cannot be resolved. True, it's complicated, but when we meet at around one table, and now we have an affirmation from the country to which some demands were presented by its brotherly nations in the Gulf region. When we hear that it's ready to discuss all these demands, we are not among those countries, but we are guarantors, and we can guarantee that we will pressure Qatar, because it's not in the interest of Qatar to remain outside the flock. Rather, it should join its brothers in the GCC. As you know, thank God, the wisdom of our brothers in the Gulf region, they should appreciate the situation we're in today, the situation in Syria, in Iraq, in Syria, and in Libya. Now is the time that we have to forget all these differences. It's true, we have we're descended into some not very healthy issues, and especially in the media. But in spite of all of that, we were one of the most people to be affected by this situation, by what our brothers in Qatar have done. But when that happened, and before this dispute came into existence, we met with our brothers in Qatar and put an end to this issue. And this is now a normal issue. We met in Riyadh in the presence of President Trump, and there was no one who to say that there was a dispute between us, but suddenly this dispute came into existence. Thank God now. What is important that we have stopped any military action. And these disputes, as I said, they are complicated, and we have seen the media campaign that is totally unacceptable to the people, because the media coming out of this country is against the people, not the rulers. And for that reasons, we have received from Qatar a letter in response to the letter I sent them, and they are willing to sit down at the table and discuss all these demands which the other parties have put down. And we're talking about 13 demands, and I'm certain that all these 13 demands, some of them, a great part of them will be resolved, and the other part, and perhaps we might not accept them, because anything that affects sovereignty, we would not accept. But we are very hopeful. We have great hope in our friends in the U.S. that they will assist them to restore things to where they used to be.
Well, that is a problem that we will get resolved, and I'm very, very honored and happy to know that you have problems with the media also. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
And there you have President Trump leaving the East Room of the White House with the Emir of Kuwait after a joint press conference there. Hi, everyone. I'm Amna Nawaz in New York. Getting some good insight there into the president's foreign policy takes when it comes to North Korea, the latest thinking of the administration on the Middle East peace process, and also, of course, the growing tensions among the Gulf countries with Qatar at the heart of it all. We're going to walk through all of that, as well as a lot of the headlines the president and his team are dealing with back in Washington right now. Let's bring in our full team to talk through that now. Rick Klein, our political director, joins us live from the Bureau. Catherine Falders is over at the White House North Lawn, and over on Capitol Hill, Ali Rogan is going to be joining in as well. Rick, over to you first. It strikes me here, the president here, of course, fielding a lot of questions when it comes to foreign policy. This is a man who ran on a very isolationist campaign, now having to take a stance when it comes to whether or not they'd get involved more deeply on the Middle East peace process, more deeply on the GCC negotiations. It's a different Trump we're seeing now.
I think that's right, Amna. You're also hearing a little bit of hesitancy. He's trying to calibrate expectations when it comes to Middle East peace. This is a guy that likes to talk in superlatives and say he can solve any problem and cut any deal, and he is acknowledging realistically some of the shortcomings and some of the challenges that confront the United States as being part of it. You see him tipping into some very delicate waters, talking about delicate negotiations involving the Kuwaitis and what the U.S. role would be, saying he'd be happy to serve as a mediator at some point. But no, I agree. This is not a lot of optimism from the president about solving some of the world's most intractable problems, and of course recognizing the threats out of North Korea and Syria as part of today's news conference as well.
And Cecilia Vega was in that room during the press conference. She joins us live now from the East Room. Cecilia, his answer to North Korea was pretty striking. We've been waiting to get more insight to see what the White House strategy would be when it comes to rising tensions there. What did you make of his response?
Well, we're a long way off from the fire and fury comments that we heard from this president not that long ago. He's now saying military action is an option, but he's walking back from that a bit, Amna. He's saying nothing is inevitable. I prefer not going that route. Hopefully, I won't have to use military action in that region. He is saying that, of course, the United States has the best weapons in the world. That was one of the things he mentioned. But he is not talking in terms of a hard line on military action right now. So that's a little bit of a shift, that they had said that they were open for negotiations. One question that he did not answer on this question of North Korea is the strategy going forward. Will he tolerate, will this administration tolerate a nuclearized North Korea that is contained? The president stuck with his line saying he won't negotiate with the press, so we don't have an answer on that one. You know, I've got to say, I'm here in the front row next to my colleagues from other outlets. There were a lot of questions among us on the back end of this, mine included, that we have this White House about Dreamers and DACA and Hurricane Irma approaching, and on DACA, you know, whether this president is willing to allow Dreamers to stay, wants to see Dreamers stay in this country after this temporary 6-month period that they've been talking about here, and having Congress work through this. He walked away without answering any of those questions. And just an aside here, there was a little bit of confusion. You know, normally these press conferences, you get 2 from the American White House press corps and 2 from the foreign press. It didn't seem to work out that way. There was some confusion as the president pointed to the foreign press here to ask them to give the Emir a third question. There was a lot of scuffle back here with who got the microphone that I'm not sure you could see, but I guess it worked out in the end.
It always works out in the end, though, doesn't it, Cecilia? I want to ask you, though, about that policy when it comes to DACA, because you did bring it up there. We heard the president yesterday, obviously, and this morning tweeting about it now, sort of softening his stance, clarifying some of the things he said before to some degree. Do we expect he's going to continue to weigh in, as it's certain to come up again and again?
Well, I guess the question is whether Nancy Pelosi calls him again and asks him to tweet, right? That's what happens today, according to the minority leader, said that she picked up the phone and called the president and asked him to put out there an assurance to these dreamers who are, I can tell you, I've spoken with them. They are very, very nervous and terrified, frankly, about what happens next and whether people will be deported after this 6-month period. But the president's tweet today didn't necessarily clear that up. There was never any question as to whether there would be deportations for these dreamers during this pending 6-month period. It's what happens after that, and this White House has not said what happens after that. Right now, the president is still punting to Congress, saying he hopes that they can get this done. Both sides, both the president and Congress, have said that they are confident that they'll be able to get something done in this 6-month time period, but it really remains to be seen.
All right, Cecilia Vega live for us there in the East Room. Thanks, Cecilia. Rick Klein, back over to you now. Obviously, this has landed on Congress's plate, whether or not or how they're going to handle the Dreamers situation moving forward. They've also got a lot else going on. I want to talk to you about this fiscal deal because the fallout from that is sort of reverberating through today now. Set this up for us now. The president basically yesterday defied his own party, broke with their leadership and said, I'm actually going to take the deal the Democrats put forward. We said it might complicate things for the Republicans moving forward. How is that panning out today?
Yeah, take out the basically, that's exactly what he did. And he did it with the Republicans in the room. This has upended politics in Washington, and it has the potential for long-term implications. Now, you never know with President Trump. Is it just a one-off? Is he just doing this one thing because he likes to cut a deal with his fellow New Yorker, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi in the room? But he cut off at the knees the Republican leadership, and they are now approving, in the process of approving, a 3-month extension that would fund the government, lift the debt ceiling through the middle of December, and also provide that emergency relief to Hurricane Harvey victims and in the afflicted region, of course, with another hurricane coming down as well. This was a major moment for Democrats. They played their hand pretty aggressively here in trying to agree to only those 3 months because they want to be back at the negotiating table later in the year. And the president, in the last 24 hours or so, has signaled more openness to other negotiating. He's even talking about getting rid of votes on the debt ceiling entirely. That's something that the Democrats would be in favor of. But Republicans, Paul Ryan, even Vice President Pence, when he was a member of Congress, they like to use the debt ceiling as leverage to try to bring other reforms. So they're not going to be in favor of that either. In addition to all of that, we're told that Nancy Pelosi reached out to the president this morning and said it would be nice if you had some kind of assurance for the Dreamers. That's what sparked the tweet that Cecilia mentioned. All that on top of the fact that President Trump gave a nice shout out on an Air Force One ride to his Senate Democrat in North Dakota yesterday. So all of this is roiling politics, and as a lot of people saying, it looks like President Trump is moving out on his own, embracing Democrats and injecting a big dose of bipartisanship at an odd time into Washington.
Nancy Pelosi's probably thinking, man, if I knew it was that easy, I would have just asked for something a long time ago. Catherine Falders, help us understand what's happening here. Is this part of some kind of strategy coming from the White House, or is it just pure and simple, this was a bipartisan thing that President Trump could put down a stamp down on?
Well, look, it could be some part of a broader strategy down the road when they work on other legislative matters. But as Rick said, we're in a little bit of unprecedented territory here now. This is creating the opportunity for more Republicans on Capitol Hill to find another bone to pick with the president. And even you see how he's referring to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi as his new friends, Chuck and Nancy. It's no secret that the president has been frustrated with Mitch McConnell. He constantly is tweeting about him, et cetera. But this deal that Nancy Pelosi and Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, revealed today about the debt limit is pretty striking. It's another taking issue with his party again here. House Speaker Paul Ryan just said in a press conference this morning that I think there's a legitimate role for the power of the purse, disagreeing with this. And the president made comments on this today saying that, this is something that we're going to discuss. And I have to say that, Republicans are taking issue with this. One of my favorite comments from North Dakota Republican Congressman Kevin Kramer, who was traveling with the president yesterday on Air Force One, says that when he heard about this 3-month funding this short-term funding deal. He said he gasped, and he had to ask the president for a little bit of clarification here, and he didn't, quite understand what was going on. So definitely another bone to pick with his own party on Capitol Hill on that.
And Paul Ryan has been weighing in on some other things too. Rick, I wanted to ask you about this. In an interview, Paul Ryan was asked about the president's tax reform plan. He wants to lower the corporate tax rate to 15%. This is the tax reform plan he holds very dear. He has been out there selling it. Paul Ryan said, you know what? The numbers look a little tough right now. Is this going to devolve into a kind of tit for tat among the Republican parties and their leader?
Well, Paul Ryan isn't looking to pick a fight, but he's looking at the numbers, he's looking at the math, and he knows that they don't have any math over on the White House side. There is no Republican tax plan. There is no White House tax plan, despite the fact that the president is now going around the country trying to sell it. So if you're actually trying to figure out the dollars and cents around it, as Paul Ryan is, you realize that some of the goals that they're setting out are a little too ambitious and maybe ambiguous. And it's worth mentioning in the context of this debt discussion that one of the reasons that Paul Ryan and the Republicans wanted to see this issue of government spending and the debt ceiling taken off the table for a longer period of time was to give oxygen for the discussion around tax reform and a major rewrite to the tax code. So the fact that the Democrats now are guaranteed a seat at the table in December means that they could hold the fate of tax reform in their hands. Keep in mind, so far it has been a Republican-only exercise, and the Republicans can't even agree on what they want. Inject Democrats into it, it's going to look much different. So I think the entire Trump agenda could be jeopardized by some of the machinations, some of the deals that are getting cut basically by the hour.
Meanwhile, over on Capitol Hill today, the ongoing investigations, of course, by congressional committees into Russian interference in the 2016 election continued, with a member of the Trump family behind closed doors for a few hours today. Catherine Falders, what have we heard about what went on when Donald Trump Jr. met with Senate Judiciary Committee members today?
Yes, so we know that Donald Jr. was on the Hill today meeting with these members behind closed doors. And I think the headline from that meeting, that the statement that he gave behind closed doors has been provided to ABC News. He said that during that 2016 meeting with the Russian lawyers in Trump Tower, now we know that the campaign chairman at the time, Paul Manafort, was also in those meetings, that, during that meeting, he wanted to determine Hillary Clinton's, quote, fitness as a candidate. He said, Don Jr. said he was skeptical about taking this meeting in the first place, and that, as it later turned out, my skepticism was justified, he said. So revealing that bit of information as questions continue to swirl about what President Trump knew when. Did his son inform him of this meeting? When did he learn of this meeting? And of course, as we've reported before, the president wanted to craft a statement and respond to this meeting that came to light in emails that Don Jr. released on his own Twitter account. So there's still questions about what the president knew when, who was involved in crafting that statement with the president. But the big headline here to me, and Rick could also speak more to this, is that he wanted to determine Clinton's fitness as a candidate. Really the first time we're hearing about that.
That's right, Amna. And if I could add to that, what makes this important, two things. One is, this is the innermost of the innermost circle, right? This is the president's own son and a campaign advisor who was bringing in campaign officials at this critical time in the summer, despite the fact we had heard there were no meetings with Russians. And it confirms what the sentiment that was clearly shared in those emails was, that they were looking to gather information about the campaign, about Hillary Clinton, from people who identified to be Russian operatives. Now, it may end up being an innocuous endgame, that they didn't do anything with the information, they didn't really know what the meeting was about, but Donald Trump Jr. is saying now on the record to investigators in the Senate that his intent here was to get information that would help his dad's campaign. That seems to undercut months' worth of denials that the White House and Trump insiders have given about the president and his aides meetings here. And it's just another piece of evidence that ties this a lot closer than is for comfort to the president himself.
It's also worth pointing
Rick,
out
I think
that's miles away from the original statement that was initially issued about what the reason for that meeting was. And Catherine, before you jump in here, I just want to make sure that we also make clear they have consistently and continue to today deny that there was any collusion, which is, of course, the heart of the investigation there. But Catherine, go ahead.
Exactly. I was going to agree with Rick's point there that they're still downplaying this meeting. They're saying because they all worked in Trump Tower that, a lot of times they wouldn't have knowledge of who would be in these meetings. But I think the main point that Rick touched on and that you're mentioning is that information on this continues to trickle out. What was discussed in this meeting? What was the purpose of the meeting? As you mentioned, of course, they have stayed consistent on denying any collusion. But as this narrative continues to trickle out of Clinton, it's really worth delving into more. What did the president know when? A lot of people, just from covering the campaign, he likes to be involved in these little decisions. Now, of course, there's no evidence that he knew specifically of this meeting at the time, but it's something to keep an eye on.
I want to ask you one more thing about something happening inside this White House, to the degree that this helps us understand how things work there. Steve Bannon, Rick Klein, let me ask you about this. The former chief strategist for President Trump, who's now, of course, left, gave his first interview since leaving the administration, and he's kind of making some shots across the bow at people who are still on the president's team. What is this all about, Rick?
So to take issue with the metaphor, Amna, shooting across the bow means you don't hit. He is actually directly trying to hit Gary Cohn and saying Gary Cohn should have resigned. And officials like him that have expressed concern about the president, he's taking a very stark statement on this and saying if you disagree with the president publicly, you should just go away. And we've known for months, and Catherine and our White House team have reported on the internecine warfare between different camps in that White House. And we know that Steve Bannon has referred to Gary the globalist in a divisive way. And clearly, there's a lot of bad blood between these men. And it hasn't gone away just because one of them is out of the White House now. Bannon is gone, but he is not forgetting his old political foe, Gary Cohn, and saying directly he should have quit if he had those kind of concerns. And keep in mind what this is about. This is all about the president's response to Charlottesville, which Steve Bannon is one of the few people on the face of the planet that will stand up and defend the president on. He has lost friends in the Republican Party among conservatives, some of his staunchest allies on Capitol Hill. They ran away when they heard this. That's what prompted Gary Cohn to speak out, and that's what has Steve Bannon now saying, actually, the president should have stood by that comment, and anyone that disagreed with the president's sentiments post-Charlottesville should have quit.
So Catherine, Bannon is gone. He's out of the White House. He's back at Breitbart, but is he still influencing things inside the White House?
Look, as Rick said, that it's probably not going away. I think we're going to start seeing this more and more. There was a good anecdote in a New York Times piece, I believe, overnight, that the president still talks to Steve Bannon often. And when Steve left, he said, my goal is to protect the president at Breitbart now. Maybe not so much his aides and the people who work with him, but we know this is a trend of President Trump's. He still communicates with his friends outside the White House who influence his thinking. His new chief of staff is trying to get a handle on that a little bit and has to an extent, but there's still reports that this is still going on. So I think that with Bannon's exit, for example, I don't think he's going away. I think he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do when he left. And he's saying, Gary Cohn, you had an obligation to resign, he said, when you disagreed with the president on this. Surely the president has seen those comments. We haven't heard from the White House yet, but I can imagine he's seen them.
All right, let's talk about one of the other biggest stories. We're obviously still tracking this unprecedented Atlantic storm that's making its way across the Caribbean right now. Paul Ryan spoke a little earlier today about the federal response, about some of the money, about how the government is preparing to deal with Hurricane Irma, which is expected to make landfall in Florida this weekend. Let's just take a listen to what he had to say. We can talk about it on the back end. Here's Paul Ryan from earlier today.
And this morning I spoke with President Trump about the urgency of our relief efforts. It's a good thing, but with new technology, FEMA is moving money faster than ever before. And so that is why there's a sense of urgency to get this relief package done. Right now, we're just thinking about everybody in Irma's path. In this hurricane, 185 miles per hour. So our thoughts and our prayers are with the people who are in the path of this current hurricane.
So, Rick, obviously this is a huge priority for Congress right now. They've approved they're working to approve the Harvey aid package, but they have to prepare for Irma at the same time. And FEMA, it's now reported, is running out of money. How do they handle this?
Well, they're moving very quickly, and it's exacerbating some of the political divisions that you saw inside the Republican Party, because conservative critics of the president on this have come out and said he was wrong to cut that kind of deal. So all of that's going to have to get shunted to the side, at least in the short term. I have been surprised, frankly, by how quickly Congress has moved. It's only Thursday. They've only been back since Tuesday. So this is actually very quick by any standard, any objective standard around congressional action, particularly given the way the negotiations have developed. So it's a little bit out of Congress's hands and onto FEMA. There's also a good deal of reporting out there about how slow the money actually is to get out the gate, despite what Paul Ryan said. A lot of this money is not going to be spent until next year or beyond, which might be appropriate because these are long-term rebuilding efforts. But this is not going to be the last bite at the apple either. I don't think anyone thinks that the money approved today by Congress is going to be the last opportunity or the last necessity for storm relief aid in 2017.
And Catherine, we know that President Trump has been talking about this too. He's obviously keeping a very close eye on the federal response and on Hurricane Irma as it makes its way here now. Do we expect that he's going to become more involved because this is something he's sort of taken ownership over to some degree?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll see him, more involved to a certain extent. But with this storm, you can see the president so far in terms of his response kind of striking a more mediated tone here. With Harvey, we talked about how he was maybe a little too positive on the front end. But today he said, look, I'm very concerned about this storm. It's going to hit Florida hard. We're as prepared as we could be. But of course, they don't want to get ahead of this. They're not talking about, any involvement, of course, on the ground yet until they assess the damage. But, they are saying that he's very involved. He continues to get briefings on this storm. He's talked to the governors multiple times from the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Florida, and is continuing to get updates from his team here. So in terms of involvement on the federal side and inside the White House and with those briefings, yeah, I'd say he's involved in that sense. And they say he's closely monitoring this storm as he did the last one. He says that those FEMA workers on the ground in Texas and Louisiana are going to be getting very little sleep because they have to go right to Florida. So he seems aware of the response efforts on the ground and the manpower that's going into that. But in terms of if he'll go down there and a possible trip, that's probably to be determined next week.
It's far too early, I think, to tell just yet. We'll keep an eye on it from back here, of course. Catherine Falders and Rick Klein. Thanks, guys. Good to talk.
Thanks, Amna.
Thanks to all of you for watching as well. If you want to keep up with the latest on Hurricane Irma, please go over to abcnews.com at any time for the latest. We'll have live updates here as well. For now, I'm Amna Nawaz, and I'll see you back here soon.